All right. Sean Cover. Is it Cover or Cover?
Yeah, it's cover, spelled like cover, but cover.
Yeah, same. You know how that goes. My mom, my middle name's Devon, but it's spelled Devon, so Google always messes that up all the time. Again, I just want to say thanks for coming out today. I've really enjoyed your just. I'm not even going to call it a tutorial to money, but in some form or fashion, it's a tutorial to money.
Yeah, thank you for having me, Sane. Um, it's true. Money is a really interesting topic, and it's one that most people don't really think about in any way. We go to work and we know that we have to earn money so that we can spend it for stuff, but we don't actually think about how money actually works. And when you look into it more and you start to learn about this stuff, you realize that how money actually works is really important. Money is the base layer for everything that's built on top of it, for civilization built on top of it. And because of that, how money works actually affects all aspects of our lives, even ones that are not financial. Um, so, that's a journey that I've been going down myself for the last few years and reached a point during this year that I felt like I wanted to start, um, talking about it in some way, which is why I started my newsletter.
So that answers the question that I even wanted to ask you. I want to ask, besides the fact that it's a resource that we all need, what piqued your interest about even going over something like that? But that pretty much that solidifies that right there. Is there anything
Well,
outside of that though?
yeah, I mean, really, a couple years ago, 3 or 4 years ago, I first learned about Bitcoin. Which
Mm,
we briefly spoke about on our Reddit chat. And like a lot of people bought Bitcoin, didn't understand what it was at all. Price goes up and down. Maybe they can't handle it. They sell their coins, or maybe they make a lot of money and they only focus on the money.
mm.
But what learning about what when I heard about Bitcoin and I started reading about it a little bit, what it made me start to question was this idea of like, what is money in the first place? So that's really the initial, starting point for where I fell down the rabbit hole of what is money at all. Like, what is money supposed to be? How does it work? Should it work? And over the last couple of years now, I've spent a lot of time really reading about monetary history, the evolution of monetary systems throughout time.
Mm.
And that understanding of monetary history has really allowed me to see some of the problems with how money works today that a lot of people don't realize is happening.
It's interesting that you mentioned Bitcoin, and honestly, that's what all of that, just cryptocurrency in a whole, is basically what, and then just going over your material led me to this, just learning so much, and it was through this research I found out about Bitcoin and how much it was actually worth. For the longest prior to this, I was just like, oh, it's a Bitcoin, and then I went through
Right.
your material on one of your videos, and it said something about, oh, it's only going to make 21 million bitcoins, and I started going, wait, how can you just make 21 million when there's more? You're going to have so many people. So I researched how much a bitcoin actually was to the dollar, and I 11,404. It's just amazing how you can. My curiosity got, it just it just spiked, and I was going, this is some interesting stuff. I don't know. It's very fascinating. It's just very fascinating yeah. It's just very fascinating,
Yeah.
man.
It is because, like you said, there's only going to be 21 million Bitcoin ever. And that's not how our money works today, right? Our money today is made predominantly through the Federal Reserve, which is a independent body that's their sole job is specifically to manage US dollars. And we know that more money gets created over time. Like with the stimulus for the COVID pandemic, it was a $2 trillion stimulus package that the Federal Reserve just hit a button and created $2 trillion out of nowhere to print this money. And with Bitcoin, there's only going to be 21 million. Although said there are 21 million, but there's many more than 21 million people out there. Bitcoin is essentially infinitely divisible. So, you can own up to 1/80 millionth of a Bitcoin known as a Satoshi. So when you
Hmm.
get down to that level, that degree of divisibility, it doesn't really matter. What matters is that there is a cap of 21 million, not, the divisibility factor. And one thing that's hard for a lot of people to sort of understand is that we've never really had a digitally scarce item before, right? Like if I download a music file or a PDF, I can just make a copy of it and then send it to you. And now there's two versions of
Mm.
that file. There's never really been a digitally scarce thing before. And the idea of that is hard for a lot of people to grasp. How could something be scarce if it's on the internet? But what Bitcoin has been able to do, since its launch by the anonymous creator Satoshi Nakamoto in 2009, is that he was able to come up with this decentralized method to create a digitally scarce item before. And most people still have not grasped that idea of digital scarcity.
From your research, have you, because I haven't gotten there yet, have you figured out or have you discovered exactly how it is as scarce as it is? I know it's he coded some kind of form or way, and for me, I'm only thinking about there's a video game where they sell weapons and there's only one of each kind. Because that's what I start thinking about, how this Bitcoin, how you could even possibly do that. So have you looked over that material to see how he actually does it?
Yeah. So, the way Bitcoin and blockchain in general works, and, a lot of people don't really understand the mechanics of how the blockchain actually functions. The way to think about it is that there are three components to the Bitcoin network, or two components that make up the blockchain.
Hmm.
If you imagine a blockchain as like an empty book, okay? The miners, we've heard of Bitcoin miners. Excuse me there. The Bitcoin miners are the ones who write the pages of the Bitcoin book. And what they write on the pages is all of the transactions that happen in, the Bitcoin transactions. Every page that gets filled up by the miners is called a block. Um, for, because it's not that easy to be a Bitcoin miner to write the pages of this blockchain, the miners
Hmm.
get rewarded with new Bitcoin being issued into the world. So starting at zero in 2009, every 10 minutes on average, new Bitcoin is created into the wild through code, um, with every Bitcoin block that gets processed, which is on average every 10 minutes. Every
Mm.
4 years, the amount of Bitcoin that gets created every 10 minutes cuts in half every 4 years. So the amount of new Bitcoin that gets created every 10 minutes cuts in half every 4 years until 2140. So over 100 years from now, at which point the amount is so infinitesimally small that there's essentially no new Bitcoin that ever gets created. So that's sort of a brief overview of how this like new Bitcoin gets issued. And it's really the fact that new Bitcoin's being issued every 10 minutes, but that amount that gets issued is being cut in half every 4 years.
I think that's I think that's amazing, and I want to know your perspective. Do you see anything wrong with having a cap like that? Or because it has a cap, that's the real beauty behind it and why it should be something we move to. How do you feel about that?
S- So the cap is one big reason of what makes it valuable. And what's part of what makes it, or part of what you have to understand in order to really follow it, is to understand why money today doesn't have a cap. And
Mm.
why we have an increasing, or what's known as an inflationary money supply to begin with. Um, and the reason we have a inflationary monetary supply, which means both the supply of money and the price of goods rises over time, right? So, when you see something like a McDonald's hamburger was worth 30, it cost 30 cents in 1970 and now it's like $2. That's inflation. And that is caused by new money entering the system over time. Now, why would we want that? Why would we want prices to rise? And the reason that we're taught, in economics and that the Federal Reserve and governments give is that you want prices to rise because it encourages people to invest and take out debt. If you take out a loan in 1970 for $100,000 to buy a house, by the time you pay off that loan in 2020, $100,000 is worth less in 2020 than it was in 1970. So the real value of debt goes down over time because of inflation and because prices rise over time. So the reason we have this inflationary monetary supply is because governments and the Federal Reserve want people to take out loans to do things like invest in businesses. And they encourage that investment through inflation because debt loses its value over time. The problem with that to a degree is that you sort of need to be responsible with how much new money you're creating, or else you can have what's known as hyperinflation, where the price of things, skyrockets in a given year and totally destroys the value of the currency itself. Zimbabwe and Venezuela are common examples where the currency inflated, more than 40,000% in a single year. So if you had, $1 in the bank, now you would need $40,000 to buy the same amount of stuff that $1 would buy you. And it's obvious why that is can totally destroy a country. So what I'm getting at, though, is that over the last 50 years, since the US left the gold standard, really, we've been printing more new money than ever. There's more than 10 times the amount of new money circulating in the country right now than there was in 1970. There was about $2 trillion total in 1970, and now there's more than $25 trillion total. In fact, the United States printed more money in June of this year, June 2020, than it had created in the first 200 years of the United States.
Jeez.
And yeah, I mean, it really is kind of staggering to think about sometimes. But the effects of this kind of stuff is subtle. They're wide ranging, and it's not that easy to get into in a simple sentence. But alongside this new money, there's a huge amount of government debt that has come with this money printing, and it all sort of feels a little bit rickety. The economy feels like a little unstable. So when you see something like Bitcoin, which is a $21 million fixed cap, and you look back at sort of the history of money a little bit, which maybe I should talk about, in a future question or something, you start to really see the value of something that is truly scarce. I mean, people who don't really understand Bitcoin, or who just don't really think about this stuff, it doesn't have to be that they don't understand, but I say
you're too caught up. If you're too caught up in everything,
exactly.
You're not gonna have to make time. Yeah.
Right. Like it makes perfect sense to me when I've been thinking about this stuff every day for 3 years. But when I talk to my dad, he's just like, what? Like, what are you talking about? And that's okay. But, people will say, oh, just because something is scarce doesn't make it valuable. But I would challenge anyone to find something that is scarce and also divisible, and that you can also send across the globe to anyone, and
without a government on. Yeah,
exactly. And they can't come up with an example because that thing doesn't exist. There is no other thing. So I would say that scarcity, when you can divide it, absolutely is valuable in and of itself.
First thing I want to say from that is I'm glad you have a passion for it, because that's what's driving you to do this, and you're figuring out a way. It's just because from your not blog, your newsletter.
Uh,
From your
yeah.
newsletter, it basically you break it down, and it's 5 minute material, 5 to 7 minute material, so you can start, learn something, and get a better understanding. And before I lose the thought, I want to ask you to tell me more about because I was aware we left the gold standard, but I don't know what we are currently using.
Yeah. So we left the gold standard in 1971, and what you should really what that should really mean to you is before 1971, dollars were not the currency of the United States. Dollars were just a paper proxy for gold. For all intents and
Mm,
purposes, gold was the national currency of the United States prior to 1971. The dollar as its own currency is only 50, 50 or 51 years old. Um, What, so we essentially started a new currency in 1971, but nobody sort of realized that, because if you had dollars in your bank account in 1971, the day before we left the gold standard, and then the day after, nothing changed, right? So nothing felt different, and nothing even feels different today. It still feels like the same dollars that you own, but it's different. The dollar is not on any standard right now. The only thing that makes the dollar valuable is the dollar itself. It's not backed by anything.
mm,
The idea is that you don't need to have a paper currency backed by something else, as long as you can carefully manage the printing of that currency so that it doesn't hyperinflate. If you're careful, a paper money can work. There are 5 properties of money: divisibility, durability, portability, recognizability, and scarcity.
mm. I remember
Um,
this.
right. And you can technically have a paper money that meets those 5 properties and works. Valueless paper can be valuable if nobody can counterfeit it and it's relatively scarce. All it relies on. So again, the dollar is not backed by anything. The dollar is just a paper currency that's controlled by the Federal Reserve and the government. Um, and you'll hear a lot of, oh, the dollar is backed by tax collection, or the dollar is backed
Yeah.
by the strength of the American military. But that's not true. None of that is true. That doesn't mean anything. The dollar is is valuable by its ability to fulfill these 5 properties really. Um, but the key aspect there is scarcity, and once we left the gold standard, we sort of traded away scarcity as the property of our money for portability. We made it easier to
Mm,
transfer money of um, at the expense of scarcity. And a good analogy for this is sort of thinking of the dollar like copper. The reason gold is more valuable than copper is because it's more scarce. Now, what that means is, if for whatever reason there was a large demand for copper, suddenly everyone wanted copper, and the price of copper would go up. Because copper is not scarce at all, copper miners would be able to mine more copper to be able to meet the increased demand for copper. Because it's not scarce, they could increase the supply easily, and then prices would eventually fall because they could keep easily increasing the supply. With gold, you can't do that, right? If the
so
price of
that's what I
gold
want to
rises,
ask you
yeah,
about that,
go.
because essentially we give value to things. And what exactly does gold do for us outside of looking pretty? I mean, I understand that we use this on computer chips. We use it in various things, but how important is gold? And I guess that's the real question. Outside of it being just scarce, what really what makes us get all hyper about gold?
Yeah. So before like the year 9000 BC, there pretty much was no money, on Earth. Um, because before 9000 BC, there was normally small groups of hunter-gatherer societies, that
Hmm.
really didn't number in more than like a couple dozen people max. They didn't really have a need for money. But money started to develop around 9000 BC alongside the development of agriculture. Really, it was really around 9000 BC when we started to be able to farm for the first time. And
Mm.
alongside farming, people started to settle down in fixed spaces and societies got bigger. And as societies got bigger, the need for money would naturally arise. So the journey of the history of money, first it was whatever a local community really needed was regularly needed by any, was valuable to a local community, like cattle or certain plants or something, became the first forms of money. And then gradually over time, it sort of became coins. And coins are where it really gets interesting because, you know, gold was not chosen to be money by any, government or king. That's not why gold became valuable. There
Hmm.
were coins across the world made of bronze, made of copper, made of silver, even made of clay, and made of other things. The problem is that none of those other things are scarce enough to function as a good form of money.
I can
And
see that.
eventually, right. And eventually, no matter what would happen, it would become too easy to increase the supply of a new money, or it would just fail in some other way, and the money would fail. Gold throughout history has been on not a 13,000 year journey of proving that, you know, I would say the takeaway from the entire history of money is that scarcity is the single most important factor for why a currency survives in the long term, as long as that scarce object is reasonably, divisible,
Hmm.
durable, etc. So the entire history of gold is essentially a slow march towards humanity realizing that gold is the scarcest, most divisible asset, that we really have on the planet. Um, and therefore, scarcity is the defining trait of gold. And it's the singular reason why gold has such a long storied history. And
And
that
why
is even
Bitcoin
true.
is beautiful. That's it. I'm tying it all together. I get it. I get it. And
Exactly.
I have a couple of
Exactly.
questions because, well, one's far fetched because are you familiar with Star Trek or any of that or of that? Yeah, that's
I
showing.
mean, let's see what you have to say. I mean, maybe
Oh,
I've seen some of the recent movies and a couple old episodes, but I don't know, how much I know.
okay, so there was an episode. I'm not going to quote it because I don't remember, but to just get to the point, there was a guy who was from like an old time where money was still the thing, and he came back and he was trying to rob everybody and he was trying to take the money. um the guys on the ship basically were like, hey, we don't know what the hell money is because
Yeah.
we've managed to evolve society to a point where innovation is basically the currency. And that's always something that like just I play around with in my mind, making innovation the currency. What are your thoughts on that? And is there a way to do that?
Well, I'm not so sure. At least just hearing about it from that description, and it's actually got me pretty curious about that Star Trek episode. And in fact, there's also another movie that I haven't seen from 2011. I've been meaning to see. It stars Justin Timberlake of all people, called In Time. But it's like an action movie where the currency is time, and
Hmm,
you pay for a cup of coffee with like 1 minute of your time, your lifespan or something. And
that's
that's an
interesting.
interesting concept to me as well, because time is really the most scarce thing that we have on Earth. But the reason I'm not so sure that innovation could kind of work is because if you boil down money to what it really is, money is really just like an exchange rate. It's a way for people to value goods and services and wealth
Mm.
in a common measurement. So that when you go to a store and you see that a plastic drinking cup is $5 while a hammer is $10, it's not that those things are worth X amount of dollars, because money in itself really isn't supposed to have any real worth. It's supposed to be a neutral thing. What the dollar and money allow us to do is that now we can say that, two $5 cups has the same value as one $10 hammer. So, money is supposed to be a neutral layer for transactions, which is why I'm not so sure how like an innovation kind of currency could work. I mean, obviously that's a metaphysical, futuristic kind of idea anyway. But we're getting towards that future fast. We're getting towards weird futures fast. So
The only
I wouldn't be
ideal I would even
surprised.
have towards that would be essentially making resources as infinite as possible, which would be a whole nother catastrophe within itself. But and I say
Right.
that, but I get it, because what you just said, it basically took it back to its primitive roots of basically what we used to do was take certain resources and services and trade them. It takes it back to the trade thing, and it did the thing where back, I'm just going on a tangent with it, but when we had a car and we didn't know how we wanted to measure how fast it would go, we would use the fastest something and call it, and we
Right.
would say this car goes something that amount times two or some whatever. But basically the dollar is taking the primitive way of how we used to trade things and giving it a value.
Right.
It makes sense.
Right. Now, and that's why gold is still even valuable today. Part of what makes gold valuable is that we have been using it for so long. Even though now we have the most advanced mining technology that we've ever had, we can technically mine more gold every year than ever before. Since there's so much gold above ground already because we've been mining it for 13,000 years, even with all this new technology, we're still only able to increase the supply of gold by, less than 2% per year, because that's how scarce it is.
Yeah.
With dollars, it's way more than 2% per year. And, sometimes you hear about other precious metals like rhodium or platinum or something, and
Hmm.
people might say that those metals are, more rare in the Earth's crust than gold is. And that's technically true, but there's a difference between rarity and scarcity. Okay. So rarity is, as I sort of said there, how finite the supply of something actually is, right? How much of
Hmm.
it there is in the Earth's crust. Scarcity sort of refers to how difficult or how possible it is to increase the supply of that thing over time. So,
Mm.
what I mean by that is, as I said, because of how much gold has already been mined, we can only increase the supply by 2% per year. With rhodium and platinum and some of these other rare precious metals, we haven't been mining them for nearly as long. So, what that means is that even though they're technically more rare in the Earth's crust, we can mine like 50% of the new supply every year because we've only been mining it so recently. So the year-to-year inflation rate for some of these other precious metals is, 50% or more a year. And that's why a lot of these other metals, while it's easy to sell someone on the idea that they're more rare than gold, they're not more scarce than gold because we can mine more of them than we can mine of gold.
It's it. So I'm trying not to go far fetched and start reaching out of and going out of space with the crap and that's going in my head, but I am, because
Like the mining, the asteroid mining, or
yeah, because essentially, like, what happens if we come across an asteroid just flowing with gold? What happens to gold then?
yeah, and that is one of the reasons why Bitcoin is better than gold. Although
Mm.
I'm gonna pause on that for now because I wanna be mean to dollars first more. Um, you know, with the asteroid mining, technology is increasing rapidly, but it's hard. And it's true that there are, asteroids and other planets or whatever that have more gold that's ever, been mined on Earth, just on a single asteroid or something. But it is very difficult for me to imagine that even in the next century or so, even if we could mine space gold, that it would
Hmm.
be cheaper, you know, that it would result in cheaper gold because, it's going to be so costly to mine that gold, to send a rocket up in space and mine the gold in
Yeah.
space and then return it to Earth, that I don't see that as being a threat to gold in the next,
Yeah.
50 to 100 years or so. But I mean, it is something to consider, a century plus into the future. So I'm not worried about that now. But what I want to transition to is, because I've said that the supply of gold only increases by 2% per year, and
Hmm.
dollars. We don't measure dollars or inflation in money in dollars by the amount of money supply that gets printed every year. Everyone talks about the CPI as the inflation rate, which is the consumer price index. So, like with gold, I said 2% of the supply is increased every year. With dollars, the Federal Reserve wants to increase the prices of goods by 2% per year. So it's like the same number, but it's technically a different thing. They want to see prices rise by 2% per year. Um,
Mm.
and what I'm trying to get at, though, is it's a question that a lot of us start to ask at some point, why can't we just print as much money as we want, right?
Hmm.
Why really can't we print as much money? And the answer for that is that more money doesn't actually buy more stuff for an economy. Okay. So, as an example, take a look around the room that you're in right now. You have a computer screen, a keyboard, a microphone, maybe a couch. I've got a couch back here. And pretend that this room that you're in right now is the entire economy. Okay. Now,
Okay.
say you have $100. Your entire economy has a supply of $100. That means that every good, every item that you see in your room has a price, and the total of all of that is $100. Okay. Now,
Okay.
say you double the money supply, and now you have $200. What changes in your room right now? Nothing. You still have one computer, one keyboard, one couch. Changing the amount of money that's circulating doesn't actually change anything about the room that you're in. Instead, what changes is that the price of each good doubles to reflect the fact that now there's $200 in the system instead of 100. The price of all the
Yeah,
stuff in the
that's a
economy.
beautiful way to portray that.
Yeah. Thank you. Um, the price of all goods is in relation to each other and into the total supply of money circulating. Um, and, where it gets a little more complicated is, if you see that $2 trillion was printed to fund a stimulus package, that's like at 10% of the total money supply. You don't see the price of milk rise by 10% in a single day. And the reason for that is because an economy is more complex. The money goes to certain places first, but then it slowly does trickle into the rest of the economy. So, when new money gets created, you don't realize immediately that it's hurting that it's really diluting the value of the dollar. And if I can give one more example, think of the economy as like a slice of as a pizza pie of 8 pizza slices,
Hmm.
and those pizza slices represent all the dollars in existence. When you print more money to do anything, whether it's for a stimulus package or a new government program or whatever, you're not making the pizza pie any bigger. Instead, what you're doing is you're now cutting the pizza into 9 slices instead of 8. And that ninth slice is whatever you're printing the money for. In this
Mm.
example, who loses, right? It's the people holding the other slices of pizza. And those other slices of pizza represent the savings and the purchasing power of all other Americans all other Americans' savings, because before they had 1/8 of the pie and now they have 1/9 of the pie. So, that that desire to prevent your pizza slice from becoming more and more diminished over time, and the way that global finance is looking is that there's going to be more money printing in the decades to come than there's ever been. That's why you see people who want to protect their slice of the pie with Bitcoin, when you know that forever you're going to have you're going to have your percent of 21 million coins forever. And no one else can make your pizza pie slice smaller.
So that brings me to one of the burning questions in my head. Should we invest in any other cryptocurrency outside of it then? Outside of
Yeah,
Bitcoin?
it's a good question. And the answer is like, maybe. The thing with other cryptocurrencies, and me, like myself, when I first learned about Bitcoin, I also got a bunch of these altcoins. Over time, though, I started to realize that a lot of these altcoins were kind of, not had no chance to really actually do anything meaningful. And I slowly whittled down my altcoin portfolio, and I still do hold a couple, but I think of them differently than I think of Bitcoin. Bitcoin I think of as as really digital gold. Like, I think it has the potential to be
Digital gold.
digital gold. Yeah, exactly. And if Bitcoin ever reached the market cap of gold, gold is a $7 trillion industry. Bitcoin's a $200 billion industry. If Bitcoin ever reached $7 trillion, which I think is not unreasonable to think, although don't invest anything you can't afford to lose and don't buy anything you don't understand.
Disclosure.
Then, yeah, disclosure.
Or disclaimer, my bad. Disclaimer.
Yeah, right. Disclaimer. Then, at the market cap of gold, one Bitcoin would be like $350,000. If it got to be like a $7 trillion asset. With the rest of these cryptocurrencies, so I think Bitcoin as is right now is valuable, to the degree of gold. Like, I think there could not be another single software update. Nothing else would need to happen for Bitcoin to be valuable. And you see a lot of cryptocurrencies that claim that they're better than Bitcoin. And what usually happens is, when it comes to blockchains, there's really this like trilemma of things. You can be fast, you can be secure, or you can be decentralized. And the trilemma means that you have to pick two out of those three, and you're not going to get to be all three. If you're fast and you're secure, that means you're probably not decentralized. If you're secure and decentralized, you're probably not fast. And if you're fast and decentralized, then your cryptocurrency is probably not secure. And Bitcoin prioritizes security and decentralization at the cost of technical speed. So you'll see these other cryptocurrencies claiming that they're faster, or blah blah blah, more transactions per second, but they almost all sacrifice decentralization and are more centralized, and many of them sacrifice security as well. So there is no cryptocurrency that tries to function as a money that is better than Bitcoin. You can see sometimes on the Reddit. I don't know if you're ever on the subreddit for our cryptocurrency. It sucks on there.
I remember your comment on it. I have not actually, because sometimes you just follow some stuff because it's like, okay, it's in my agenda to do stuff.
Right. It's a dumpster fire on there, and they're like, oh, Bitcoin is old tech, it's outdated, blah, blah, blah. Here's my 200th ranked altcoin or something. But it really just represents a misunderstanding of how these things actually work. And I can say with near certainty that whatever faster coin you think you have is more centralized and less secure than what Bitcoin is. Now, again, that doesn't necessarily mean that the price of those things won't go up, right? Although you have to be careful, because there are a lot of outright scams in the cryptocurrency space. But
Mm.
alongside, like a ton of like near outright scams. If I went to the coinmarketcap.com right now,
Hmm.
I could go through the list of the top 100, and 45 of them I would say that no one should ever touch. Um,
Dude, I wish we
but
could do that right now, but I'll
yeah, I
pull up the
mean,
screen and you go
yeah,
through it.
I mean, yeah, I'm not opposed to just super quickly doing that, but among them there are certain potentially valuable innovations on there, and there are a select few you know crypto assets that are still a risk, and you don't know whether they're going to go up or down, but are at least trying to be something innovative, and that have the potential to, do some sort of decentralized finance or decentralized open, system of some kind where there is potential. So, I do
Well,
think there
what
might
is
be like a
your
dozen. Yeah. There might be like a
I want to
dozen
know
crypto
your
assets that make it in the end, but it is a little unclear what those are going to end up being outside of Bitcoin. And one more sentence before you go. You know, I think of Bitcoin as something that I plan to never sell. Like, I plan on that more likely being handed down to my kids than me selling. I think it's going to be more valuable as Bitcoin than as dollars once it's, more expensive. I plan on
I
keeping
can
that
see that.
forever. Um, I hold some altcoins, but all of those I plan to sell if they make me money. Those are it could still be a 5-year investment, but those I'm planning to sell if they go, they're not life changing. They're not going to potentially change the world the way that Bitcoin might.
Well, that makes me, because I have invested in, what was it? I believe it's Doge. Yeah, no, it's not believe. It's Dogecoin. And the reason behind it was that little Doge dog is memeable. And there's a good chance that if they, I could see that turning it to something more than what it already is. And how certain things that are said just give it a quick boost within it. What are your thoughts currently on Dogecoin?
I mean, Dogecoin is a meme coin, as you said. And what I can confidently say, it's not a scam, the way that again, I'm looking at Coin Market Cap right now. XRP is basically a scam. BCH, ADA, vaporware. I wouldn't touch a lot of these things. Dogecoin
Vaporware.
is, yeah, yeah. Like, there's nothing of significance is ever going to be built on most of these things. Tron, EOS, Stellar, but Dogecoin, I don't even think there has been a code development on in like 3 or 4 years. No one really takes it seriously, but at the same time, nobody hates Dogecoin. It is a meme coin. It pumps almost every time something else pumps. And I think it is a good bet that, if that people might see that and see that, one Doge is like, 2/10 of a cent or whatever, that, that people buy that. I mean, Doge isn't going to do anything that, wow, Doge, oh, no, never mind. I was looking at the wrong thing, but, Doge isn't going to it's not going to be anything meaningful as like an asset, but it's not, a bad pick to think that it might go up in value.
I I wanted to also segue to, because I know you got a limited timestamp, and I want to do this before I forgot, because what we
Yep.
do, or it's one of the newer things that I do, when I have a guest that me or anybody else in the Zuzu community are looking for or interested in on certain topics, I ask them if they have any questions, and they send them to me, and I wanted to go ahead and start asking some questions from there, so that way I can,
Okay. Yeah.
and
Happy
the
to.
first one on that list is, and I kind of look at it, I think we kind of already went over it, but I'll just ask it again. Why are new cryptos constantly being made? Do they have real societal utility, or is it a fad?
It's both, but 85% is a fad of people trying to get wealthy in some way. And it can be difficult to decipher what is real and what is, nonsense. Like recently, Polkadot is a cryptocurrency network that just launched, and
Hmm.
Polkadot's like a very legit, project. It's trying to be sort of a Ethereum competitor. That doesn't mean it's going to work. Ethereum has all the developer base and a lot of a big head start, but like Polkadot is trying to do something like Ethereum, where it also has a novel approach, where like blockchains can talk to each other. They can communicate and work together. Like
Mm.
that is like a novel innovation, in the blockchain cryptocurrency space that you know that that potentially gives it value. It doesn't necessarily give it value because so far, there's not really any blockchain asset or application, no decentralized app that really has any value yet in itself other than speculation. A lot of these things are about the potential of what they could be. So, linking two useless blockchains together, isn't really a great isn't really a great purpose. But the fact is that Polkadot and Cosmos is another one that's trying to do this inter-blockchain stuff. That it is a relatively novel innovation in the blockchain space. That doesn't mean it's going
Mm.
to be a success. Doesn't mean it's going to be valuable. But there are new networks being launched. Another one, Filecoin. I don't know if it actually launched or not yet. It's coming soon. If not, it's trying to be like Dropbox, but decentralized, file storage, but where there's no centralized server. It's a cool idea. It doesn't mean, and it's like a legit, not a scam project. It doesn't mean that it's going to work again. And it doesn't necessarily mean that the coin should be valuable, but there are some legitimate projects in the blockchain digital asset space where new things are being tried that don't exist in traditional ways today.
That so when you were talking about the whole connecting different, well, basically useless Dogecoin, or not that, not Dogecoin. When
Right
you were
now,
talking about connecting different cryptocurrencies that basically are that can be kind of useless along the line at the current state that they're in. Um,
right.
I wonder if that would be something that would happen when these as time progresses, because as Bitcoin, basically yes, it's a digital gold. When you think about it, it is a digital gold. Then those
Right.
other one would probably do their best to, I don't know, combine together to make two of them a greater source. And oh, I guess the question that it leads me up to is there a converter? Because that's the real thing that would be the question. Is there currently a converter where, hey, I've invested tons of dollars in altcoin. Is there a converter where you can just pop it up and then transfer that into whatever that is in Dogecoin or whatever that is in Bitcoin?
So on a cross blockchain in a cross blockchain way, no, not yet. Although it's being worked on in what is known as atomic swaps, where you could technically like go straight from Bitcoin to Ethereum without having to go through an exchange. That's
Hmm.
not currently something that's available. But you can often swap assets on a given blockchain. And what I mean is, Ethereum is the number two cryptocurrency, and you can build on top of Ethereum, right? So if you wanted to build a decentralized app, a decentralized messenger, a decentralized Facebook, or whatever, you could build that on top of Ethereum. You can issue your own token on top of Ethereum. Now, so many cryptocurrencies that are out there right now are built on top of Ethereum. Like Link, Chainlink right now, that is an
Hmm.
Ethereum token. It has its own coin, but it's built on top of Ethereum. Um, and I'm trying to scroll down to see what the next one is. Like VeChain down here, Lend. There's a lot of coins that are built on top of Ethereum. And what's coming up now are these decentralized exchanges where you can sort of swap one Ethereum token for another Ethereum token without having to go through, like a Coinbase or a
It's
centralized
kind of
exchange or
cool.
anything. Yeah, it is cool. Uniswap is the biggest decentralized exchange out there, and it really is cool to see. To be able to go directly from one coin to another coin without having to sell to dollars first or to Bitcoin or whatever. Ethereum is the only platform where this kind of stuff has really gained any traction so far, but more coins are starting to build on Cosmos. Polkadot is launching, and there promises to be the same kind of functionality on there too. Nobody's really using Tezos, but it's technically the same kind of available network. And so right now, coins that are built on top of one blockchain can sort of start to be exchanged directly for coins on that same blockchain. But for now, like, you can't go from any of those things to Bitcoin.
So
Although
with
it does
all of
seem like it
that,
will be possible.
it because the next question I have, this segues into the next question that I have from the community, but um, with all of those currencies and with all of them being created, because you don't need all of them, you don't need them to keep constantly. It just kind of gets to a point where I say, like, is there a point for you to really get up and try to start mining for your own new cryptocurrency? Not at this point, because there's already stuff. Maybe you should figure out how to join the game. But with that, I could see maybe a government taking a coin that isn't number one, maybe it's number three, and then the government getting behind it to then issue that out to the public and then amp it up that way. And with that, it goes to the next question, which is, what are the implications of a government created cryptocurrency?
Yeah, so central bank digital currencies, or CBDCs, are not interesting at all, in my opinion. Money as it is today is essentially digital anyway, right? Like, how many people are using cash? Although you should be using cash more. Financial privacy, I'm a big cash advocate. But
Same.
money is mostly digital anyway. A central bank digital currency, maybe, the wallet would function a little bit more like a cryptocurrency wallet. But a central bank digital currency, while it would update, the financial structure of how money works in a modern system, it's not actually a threat to something like Bitcoin, because what makes Bitcoin valuable is that, the monetary policy is set in stone with the 21 million cap, and that's never going to be changed. And the fact that it's censorship resistant, which means no one can block someone else from, from sending a transaction. It can't be shut down the way, the United States would never let you send a payment to Iran today. So the sound money principles of the 21 million cap and the fixed monetary policy and the censorship resistance are what make Bitcoin valuable. If there was a central bank cryptocurrency, it would be treated just like a normal currency today. They would keep inflating the supply the same way they do with dollars. It wouldn't be any different in that regard. And it would not be censorship resistant. You still would not be able to donate to Iran. And I know people might be like, why would you want to? But in Belarus right now, they've got some crazy dictator who totally fixed the election, and people are protesting. And there's one way in the entire world that you could donate money to those protesters, and it's with Bitcoin. You would not be able to do that with US dollars, and you wouldn't be able to do that with dollars on a central bank digital currency.
That reminds me
Yeah.
of, there was an instant, crap, it's all butchy and choppy in my mind, but there was there's a country, and I'm just gonna say a country because I don't remember the damn name, but they couldn't, they didn't have access to certain books and videos, but someone built within Minecraft a way for them to see books and stuff and videos outside of
That's
that
very
within
cool.
Minecraft, within a Minecraft server. And this segues to the thoughts of, because people are constantly, or developers are figuring out ways to implement a particular coin in their game so they can make something like Bitcoin where people actually use Bitcoin within a video game, and that would up the value of it for in the game community. But it's like you could technically do it that way. If you have a video game in another place, you could transfer coins that way. It's very interesting.
Yeah, it is cool. It is interesting, and that's very cool about the Minecraft stuff. And like gaming is one possible, use case for a blockchain that I know some people are exploring. Like what if there was like a universal digital currency that was used on multiple games, right? So like I could buy V-Bucks in Fortnite, but then I could transfer that currency to Modern Warfare or something. It was like
Yeah.
one currency made for video games. So I know people are working on that as a possible implementation for a blockchain. I think it might be a tough sell because those developers make money from their currencies. Like they might not want to implement something else, but it is a possibility. And that does sort of remind me, a lot of people promise uses for a blockchain that really don't actually need a blockchain. Blockchains are just like existing databases that you can already have on the internet, except they're slower and less efficient. The only reason that anything would ever need a blockchain is if you want decentralization. It's the one and only advantage that a blockchain can produce over a regular database. So what that means is if a company is issuing like one currency, a cryptocurrency, it does not need a blockchain because it's not decentralized. An example I like to give is, Walmart was exploring blockchain technology to show people, the steps that their food was taking on the supply chain. Supply chain is a hot topic among some people, but you can track and manage a supply chain just as easily with a centralized database. A blockchain doesn't help you at all in that regard. So keep in mind, if decentralization is not necessary, then a blockchain is not needed for it to work.
Well, in that case, this it's kind of question number 3 from the community, which is what are your thoughts on China's venture into crypto? Because I mean, if you don't need decentralization, then what are your thoughts on China with that?
China is creating spyware. They already have they are an authoritarian regime that spies on their citizens. And
Yeah.
step one in that process was with not completely, but trying to eradicate cash. Cash is private. Governments would never let cash happen today if someone invented it, but cash is private. It's how it's always been. And China doesn't want that to happen. So like, for example, when the Free Hong Kong protests were happening last year, I think it was, and people used their WeChat app on their phone to pay for subway fare to go to these protests. Those people were later tracked and arrested for using the WeChat app on their phone. So China wants to issue a digital currency because one, yes, it will be the first country to do so. And secondly, so it can completely control its citizens. It's interesting in a horrible way because they're going to succeed at completely crippling whatever freedoms, their population already has. And I will say here, China is a big offender for that, as I just said. But even in the United States, there is a lack of censorship resistance in the money. You can't pay whoever you want. For example, like marijuana shops often are not accepted by banks. You have to only pay cash in those kind of places because the banks won't let them do it, even though it's not illegal. They can't join a bank. Sex workers, you can't, get rejected from banks all the time as well. And, it sort of highlights this again, with Bitcoin, the rules are the same for everyone. Bitcoin cannot tell you that you are a sex worker, so you do not get to use the money.
Yeah.
And it's why the only fair, censorship resistant, neutral approach is that anyone who wants to can partake. And then you'll get the other people that say, oh, criminals, bad people are using it. But in order to prevent financial abuse and these authoritarian regimes who prevent their citizens from transacting with one another and cut people off at the blink of a hat. Trump declared Antifa a terrorist organization. I wouldn't be surprised. I mean, we'll see what happens in the election, but by declaring Antifa an organization just based on suspicion, he could cut your bank account off tomorrow if he accuses you of being a member of Antifa. My friend up here is a big activist, a big protester. I wouldn't be surprised if he just got cut off from the banking system tomorrow for being quote unquote Antifa. You need to let everyone participate is the only way it works.
Well, the crazy part about that is because it's water we haven't got on top of yet, and it's just I could see the way things go. There's enough people and enough voices that would be against Bitcoin if they see it tied to an organization that they deem, I don't know, as an enemy. And I could see them creating a law that is, instead of maybe canceling your account, I don't know, I could see them figuring out a way to where they could be on top of that, or creating some law or some regulation, because they could see Bitcoin as too powerful. And I mean, I'm not trying to promote this. This is not an ad for the government, but it's just like we haven't reached those waters yet. It'll be like the same thing when Zuckerberg was in front of the courts talking, and we'll just look at it and we'll be freaking weirded out and scared about it. So I can just see them doing the first thing. Well, okay, let's regulate it till we figure this out.
Yeah.
And
so
it's weird.
I'm a little bit worried about that as well. States trying to ban Bitcoin or something. What works at least a little bit in Bitcoin's favor is one, you mentioned the Zuckerberg thing. Bitcoin has no company. There's no one you could call in front of Congress to testify for Bitcoin. You can get some other an expert or something, but there is no Bitcoin company. There's no Bitcoin president or CEO. There's no one to call in front of Congress to do that. So that's one good thing. And then secondly, because the network is so decentralized, the government could not stop Bitcoin. They couldn't shut it down. You could make it illegal in America, but you couldn't stop Bitcoin from existing. And when we talk about decentralization, this is really where it matters. Ethereum fans might be like, oh, ETH is the best money because you can do X, Y, and Z. You can do all this other stuff on ETH. You've got like the Nano people who is a random altcoin, but they're like, oh, it's faster than Bitcoin and decentralized, even though, when we're talking about decentralized, something might be decentralized enough where it's more decentralized than any company we have right now. But the level of decentralization we're talking about with Bitcoin is the ability to withstand a nation state attack from the United States. If the US put all of its power to shutting down the network, would they be able to do it? And for every single other cryptocurrency, the answer is probably yes. They could shut it down. Maybe not like a couple, like Monero or something, but pretty much yes. They could shut it down, but it would be costly and it would be really hard. They'd have to really want to shut everything down, but they could. With Bitcoin, the answer is it's maybe. And I'm inclined to think no, they would not be able to shut it down.
That's a lot of power, man.
Yeah, I know, exactly. So again, they could make it illegal, and I would be worried about that a little bit too. What's helping in that regard again is, recently, I don't know if you heard, this company MicroStrategy is a publicly traded company on, you can buy the stock on Schwab or whatever you buy stocks on Robinhood. It's a $1 billion company, and they announced that they put their entire $500 million cash reserve into Bitcoin. That Bitcoin is going to be a primary treasury asset. So, that was huge. That's the first publicly traded company that is now buying Bitcoin. And then earlier this
that'll
week,
get you moving towards that. Yeah.
exactly. And then earlier this week, Square, owned by Jack Dorsey, who owns Twitter as well. He's, the creator of Twitter and Square owns the Cash App, if you know Cash App.
Yeah, familiar.
They're a big company. That's an $80 billion company. And they announced that they added $50 billion worth of Bitcoin to their reserves this week too. So this really represents a start where it seems like more publicly traded companies are going to be adding Bitcoin as a reserve asset on their balance books, on their balance sheets. And the reason that's valuable is because if enough companies have Bitcoin on their balance sheets, like if Apple starts owning Bitcoin, it essentially becomes impossible for the government to ban, because then banning Bitcoin would crash, the stocks of all these companies that are now adding Bitcoin as a reserve asset. And
that's
the reason
cool. I like that.
Right. So that sort of puts a moat around the amount of regulation that can really be done in that way. Like, because you could start hurting companies. And the reason these companies are doing it is because they see how much money is being printed in dollars, and they don't trust dollars to retain their value anymore. And then one other thing that I'll mention, even though it's not going to cross the mind of U.S. regulators, but why it would be bad for the country, besides obvious reasons, if they did ban Bitcoin. As soon as you ban Bitcoin, it then creates a game theory for other countries who are opposed to the United States to adopt it even more. So say the U.S. is not interested in Bitcoin or whatever, they ban their citizens from using it, and then Russia and China together, start buying up the Bitcoin. It will lead to a staggering price rise in Bitcoin, and enemies of the U.S. would benefit at the expense of the United States.
Dude, you just opened up a can of worms. That's not in the history books of the kids of tomorrow. This period will be known, not the space race or the Cold War. Well, it will be considered a Cold War, but it'll be a new type of space race. I don't know what we'd call it yet, but that's exactly what that is.
Right. So yeah, I mean that kind of stuff is all up in the air, and that game theory kind of element of among nations has not even started yet. Really, it'll be interesting once a country formally announces that as a nation it's holding Bitcoin as part of its reserves. I mean, we know that some Venezuela and Iran probably are mining Bitcoin, and those are not exactly countries that a lot of Americans like. But, if Switzerland or Sweden announces that they do something, that's a huge validation for Bitcoin, even though Square buying it this past week or so was a big validation as well. So all of that will be interesting. And the final thing that makes it hard for a government to ban is that, they can't seize it easily. They can't just freeze your bank account and get your Bitcoin. I mean, they can if you're keeping your money on an exchange, a Bitcoin on your exchange, which is why you should always use, your own wallet, your own hardware wallet, and not your keys, not your coins, and try to manage that responsibly. And then, I mean, technically, there are more things you can do, to sort of protect yourself, even beyond just having your 24 seed words, but or 12 or 24 seed words. But the fact that the government can't simply flip a switch and freeze your Bitcoin makes it harder for them as well to really meaningfully ban. But Congress doesn't understand Bitcoin at all. They're pretty ignorant.
It's like the damn internet.
Yeah. So I wouldn't be surprised for them to try and do something stupid anyway. Our payment system, our financial system is on these like rails that were built in like the 70s. And here comes Bitcoin. It's this new modern thing that's never really been seen before. And regulators are trying to treat it as if it's with the same rules from the 70s. And I'm going to steal this example from Andreas Antonopoulos, who's one of the best Bitcoin speakers out there. You should go to his YouTube and watch some of his videos. He's an unbelievable speaker. And, you know, it's like as if when we were living in the era of horses and carriages, and the first cars were just hitting the road, and the regulators were trying to say that all transportation companies need to have a veterinarian on staff, and measuring success of transportation companies by like how much hay they used in a given year. And they don't realize that the way that they're looking at these things is just completely irrelevant to to the future that's being built. Right now, most people get paid every 2 weeks, and you can't do this on Bitcoin yet, but we're heading towards a future where you can be paid for your work by the second, right? Like that's the kind of thing where money is heading into the future.
That's
Yeah,
evil.
yeah, I hear that. And your self-driving car is never going to have a credit card attached to it to pay for parking, but it might be able to have a little Bitcoin to do that kind of thing. So, money as an application layer is where this stuff's heading. Regulators are completely behind, but your question was originally about, I don't even know, China or trying to ban
Dude,
Bitcoin.
I got another question for you. Are there any privacy or security issues with using a cryptocurrency?
Yeah, I mean, unfortunately, Bitcoin and other cryptocurrencies are really not very private, unfortunately. I mean, it was, they're pseudonymous. You get these long addresses that technically don't, reveal any information. But the problem is that we, all of us buy our cryptocurrencies, or not all of us, but probably most of us, from these regulated exchanges where you have to put all your information in, and you even have to sometimes upload a picture of your identification. And when you buy a cryptocurrency, and this is called KYC, know your customer, anti-money laundering laws. I hate KYC AML. Because the blockchain ledgers are transparent and everyone can see what's going on. It's part of the benefit, but it sort of makes it that once you buy coins from a regulated exchange, to a chain analysis company, they're sort of able to track you wherever you go. So Bitcoin, ETH, nothing is really fully, truly private right now. I mean, Monero, you can kind of like it's a top privacy coin. I mean, like if you want to talk Zcash, that could be too. But other than that, there's really not much. And even those have some flaws as well. I mean, with Bitcoin, emerging technologies are being done, like CoinJoin, which I won't really explain right now. But for right this second, it's really hard to be private on a cryptocurrency or on a blockchain.
That is, whew. I will segue to the next question, and that's is there still a place for crypto mining for the average person?
I mean, you would need cheap electricity. You would need to be living somewhere where electricity is cheap. I'm in New York City, and there's no universe where it would make sense for me to be a crypto miner. I mean,
Although you could write it off, you could write it all off at the end of the year.
Write it all off as if do you mean like if it's as a business expense or what?
Yeah.
Could you write that off? What do you mean?
If you have a business, see it's the things. The waters have yet to be tested, but it would pose for a good question. Maybe it would take some government stuff, but in theory, right now, you should be able to write that kind of stuff off. Throw an LLC behind it, and you do it, and then take it when you do your taxes and get that money. Yeah, get it back.
It's pretty interesting. I'm going to keep thinking about that because I just filed for an LLC because I'm working on a little side business idea. So I'm going to keep that in mind. Yeah, I mean, you would need, regardless or what, not considering what you just said about potentially being able to write it off. I mean, maybe you can. If you do, I wouldn't be surprised if in a couple of years they change that or whatever. And again, wow, you sort of stumbled me there for a sec. But if you can't write it off, then it really only makes sense if you have pretty cheap electricity. I mean, there are some mining profitability calculators out on the web. If you Google that will, ask you to input what your graphics card is or whatever, and your cost of electricity per kilowatt hour, and it'll tell you what the most efficient thing to mine is for profitability. But it's tough to be profitable out there, and you got a lot of people trying to capitalize on whatever they can mine. And I mean, a lot of coin proof of stake as well, which you can't mine.
I don't know how your energy, or for me, I'm in Texas, and I don't know how your energy there works, but in TXU offers this thing where you can nights are free. My nights after 8 o'clock, they're free to about like 5:30, which means you could
Huh.
run your crypto mining at night. So that way it's essentially free as hell for you to do your business.
Yeah, I mean, with that, then you should be profitable being able to mine. I have never mined myself because I've only lived in high cost areas,
Yeah.
but or at least electricity wise. But I mean, if you have free electricity, it could be something to look into. Although I'm not sure, how technical you have to be in order to mine. Whether you need to whether it's as simple as just downloading software, or whether you actually need to be able to engage in a code interface or something. But it's worth looking into. Although I will say, you'll see advertisements for like cloud mining or whatever, where it's
Mhm.
like, oh, you pay us and we'll pay you out some portion of our mining thing or whatever, and stay away from cloud mining. That is a scam.
That's great to know. I will just throw out there one an important part from the start. I don't know too much in it, but you need a very good graphics card. It starts with that.
Right. Right, because
I'm
people have been mining more and more over the years. They've made it so, and that's made it so that you need better and better equipment to mine. I mean, in order to mine Bitcoin, you'd probably need to buy a specialty piece of equipment called an ASIC, because your regular computer wouldn't be able to handle it anymore. But there are other cryptocurrencies out there that can be mined with a good GPU graphics card.
I I have a guy coming on this week. He's in crypto artistry. First time I've actually heard about it. I don't know if that's
This
associated with crypto mining, but do you have any experience or thoughts on crypto artistry?
I mean, I like Bitcoin, man. So I'm up to support artists if I see something that I would want to buy. I have a Bitcoin mug, that I custom made myself online that I like to drink from. Long Bitcoin, short the bankers. I have I have a Zcash mug too, but that's mostly a joke. And so, I mean, I'm here for the artistry. I have a Bitcoin hat, although it's a BTC Pay server hat, which is a good Bitcoin company. So, I'm here for Bitcoin artistry. You got to be careful advertising that you're a Bitcoin person, for your own security
Yeah,
reasons, at least, to some degree. I don't know if you're familiar with what's called the $5 wrench attack in security, but it
I
came
am
from a
not.
comic. Yeah, it came from a comic. Left panel, one guy's talking about, oh, I have my password encrypted on the most advanced decryption possible, and it's stored in this very expensive safe. No one could hack this. And then the next panel is two criminals saying, let's go beat him with this $5 wrench until he opens the safe for us, right?
Mm.
So, you can have the most expensive safe in the world. But if someone comes and beats you with a wrench, you're going to open the safe for them probably. So you want to have your own security, um, resistant to $5 wrench attacks. So what that sort of means is like if someone came to my place right now, no matter what they did, it would be impossible for them to, take any of my stuff. Like it's not here.
Yeah.
You can't do that. So anyway, but I support Bitcoin artistry for sure. And if you
Well,
know the name of the guy, if he's got a website, I would check out his stuff.
Okay. Well, as you see how this stuff goes in the little community, it'll all be there for you when he logs in and joins in. My
Gotcha.
last question for you will be, what is a
Okay.
good philosophy for being responsible with money? For example, how much should be liquid money before you think about investing and stuff? Are there any more, or are there any other guidelines you'd recommend?
That's a good question. Yeah, I mean, the first thing that you want to mostly do is try to take care of like any debts that you have. At the very least, don't really have any credit card debt. Credit card debt's like the first thing that you should just get rid of. Not have it be a part of your life at all, if possible.
Yeah.
Um, yeah, I mean, secondly, you really do want to try to build. Like three months at least worth of cash to have on hand in case of emergencies, in case you get laid off or something.
Yeah.
3 to 6 months worth of cash. And then, I mean, I know that's easier said than done though, right? And sometimes you want to build your cash balance while you're investing at the same time. Like it's not all cash and then all investments, but that's a goal you want to hit. You want to hit 3 to 6 months worth of cash. And then, you should really make a budget and understand your spending. The way that I like to do things is I have a basic little budget template or whatever. I don't track all my expenses. What I do is every month I have a separate bank account where I make one transfer from my main account to this separate account. One lump sum every month, and that's my spending money for the month. So I don't go over this one transfer. It makes it a lot easier for me to have my spending money separate from the money where like my bills are being automatically charged and stuff.
Yeah.
So I can calculate exactly how much I want to spend throughout the whole month. I can just check the app and see the balance for the month. And then I personally, you can either, use that leftover money the next month, or I tend to usually invest my money. Unfortunately with, my whole thing, I'm very long gold, long Bitcoin. And the reason for that is because I think there's going to be a lot more money printing that gets done, over the next decade or so. And I think a lot of it is going to come from, things like universal basic income, which is a proposal that, would have been laughed out the door 5 years ago, but now it almost seems like inevitable. Like some sort of thing is going to happen at some point. And remember that printing more money doesn't buy more stuff for an economy. So when you give everyone universal basic income, what it's really doing is lowering the value of every dollar that's already in existence. Every dollar printed lowers the value of every dollar that's already in existence. And that's sort of why you see the coronavirus stimulus. And the coronavirus stimulus and universal basic income, they both increase inequality. Okay. Because like with the $1,200 stimulus, poor people or lower class Americans spend that $1,200 on food, on rent, or whatever, right?
Yeah.
And then people who are not struggling, buy Apple stock with their $1,200.
Yeah.
So the lower income Americans lose the money. I mean, they spend it, and their lives are better because of it. But the wealth income inequality gap grows. And so that's why it's sort of misguided, I guess. You see a lot of people on the left that are complaining about how, Amazon stock has risen so much over the last couple months. And for me, it's like the reason that that's happening is because of the stimulus, and you want more stimulus, but the more stimulus you get, the more money that people are going to be pumping into these stocks, and it raises the income inequality gap further. So my personal investment philosophy for the most part is I am trying to keep as little in cash as possible. I think cash is going to keep losing value. It's going to lose more and more value than ever. But you want to maintain that 3 to 6 months worth of cash balance. And again, you actually probably shouldn't do what I do, because I have spent, the last 3+ years learning about money and monetary history. And, it doesn't mean that I'm going to be successful with my strategy, but it does mean that I, fully understand what I am doing. I'm
Yeah.
not just putting my money somewhere where I don't understand what's going to happen exactly. I might be wrong exactly, but it will be because I was wrong, not because I didn't know, what I felt about something. So, stocks are going to keep going up as long as they're going to keep pumping stimulus into the economy, I think. And I think they're probably going to keep pumping stimulus into the economy forever, because it's the only thing that's propping up the stock market. I mean, if Biden wins the economy, I wouldn't be surprised if, and if the Dems sweep the Senate as well, that we're going to get, I wouldn't be surprised if families get $2,000 per month for the next, couple months in stimulus, because that's what they were trying to pass during the Trump admin. That didn't get passed. But if Biden wins, there's going to be a lot more stimulus coming.
Well, because I know
Yeah.
we're reaching the mark. The question then would be, do you see a UBI that's also a cryptocurrency?
In the first proposals for, or one of the stimulus packages that ended up being rejected, there was language in the initial bill for customers to sort of open direct accounts with the Federal Reserve for a digital currency. And
Mm.
that language got removed from the actual bill that was passed. I'm blanking on whether it was in the first bill or if it was with one of the later bills that never actually got passed. But the language got removed because politicians were struggling with the idea that some people don't have bank accounts, and those people, they take a check, they have to bring it to a cash for check place. It doesn't, those people take a cut. And eventually what they decided on was these prepaid debit cards or whatever. For people that didn't input their bank account info or get a check.
Yeah.
So, it is possible that a UBI could be implemented in the form of a more direct digital currency, but I would bet against that happening in the next 4 years.
Yeah.
I would think one, it's very unlikely if Trump wins, and then secondly, I still just don't see it happening in the first 4 years of a Biden admin.
Well, Sean, it's been a very informative. It's been a blast hanging with you today, and I'm gonna drop the bot off because I got a couple of questions for you. And yeah,